I've led the technical delivery of this project along with a very large team of people who aren't all with us on the call today. And Sharif is one of the production crew, one of the lead producers for BBC BBC Wales, who was seconded into the project quite early on. We're going to talk to you about what we've done today, but from a slightly different perspective. So just got to start off with a little bit about what Radio Wales is all about. So Radio Wales is part of a much bigger family of BBC Cymru Wales. The new building is in the city centre of Cardiff, and it's a location for content production in Welsh and English across BBC One Wales, BBC Two Wales, S4C, who are moving into the building. They're not quite with us yet. BBC Radio Wales, BBC Radio Cymru, and also contributions to network radio. There's a lot of cultural connectivity into the city centre here. There's an orchestra not in part of the building, it's located elsewhere. Big production facilities down in Rothlock, just down the road, which is where production is made in the sound stages, but it's edited here. So there's a lot of editing facilities in the new building. So it's a new building. You can see it in the middle there on the slide, right in the city centre. Anyone who knows Cardiff will know that this used to be the bus depot. We've certainly moved things on quite away from then. And it's part of a catalyst for regeneration around the whole city centre, which is estimated eventually to bring in £1 billion worth of economic value. Obviously set back a little bit with some of the troubles of COVID, which we'll be talking about in these slides. We're using a lot of new technology. We've got IP-based routing based on SG2110 for video and AS67 and Dante for audio. We've got a new MAM. We've got centralised storage. We've virtualized a lot of the computer systems behind the technology. New sound desks, new studio automation, a new read-all comms system. Very, very significant shift in technology for the users to get their heads around. Overall, we've met the timelines, we've met the budgets. COVID dealt us a few curveballs towards the end of the project, but we've got round them. A few facts and figures here. I'll keep quick on this. You can take the slides away and look at this later, but just to give you an outline here, there's some big studios, big production facilities, lots of radio facilities, lots of post-production. I won't linger on those figures. They don't really come across particularly well while I'm talking. And a few photos here. This shows some of the studio spaces, the flexible space and the newsroom over on the left, the drama studio on the right, and just looking across the atrium and showing you how the whole area has been, the whole building, all areas in the building have been designed to be production spaces. So I'll hand over to Sharif now to pick up on some of the user's perspective of this adventure into the new building.
Thanks, Mark. Well, initially, with a lot of these big projects, I imagine it's very remote. There's lots of kind of gathering, and it's the core project teams that seem to be working on things, and it seems like a long distant thing for people in production. It's all very well saying 8 years time you're going to go and move into new studios. And also we've still got services to run. We've got to keep them running day to day, and it's not that we've got two jobs to do at the same time. We've got the day-to-day services, and we've got to involve ourselves in the project, and so we've got to fit that around until we get close to the project where some of us might, like myself, can get fully involved with it. So when things actually do get underway, it feels like it's a train that's been coming for ages, and then all of a sudden it hits and things are really moving along. So it was almost like as Sly says, a bit of an infestation of the project coming into our lives as time went on. And in terms of the old building, we were, the old building, the site was great in so many ways, but there were just so many different issues, and that's why it was deemed that it needed a new site. But the biggest issue for us was a lot of our tech was sorely in need of a refresh. So it's a case of, great new toys, but which ones? And the biggest questions were all about ways of working, not just about just because that's the way it's always been done, that's the way we should do things. That's the question which I'm sure kind of comes up with all projects. So looking at the ways we work, the ways we might work, and the ways we could potentially work in the future. And of course, flexibility, a big word for this sort of thing, but with flexibility comes complexity, and you're trying to kind of balance those constantly. It's all very well that an engineer and trained operator can use it, but could a general production user who might get an hour's training, if at most, use it? And then there are more technical questions which were kind of beyond me in terms of capacity and resilience. So how many studios, we had various rooms and workshops, how many studios, how do you deal with resilience? And there's a whole thing about making everything redundant, or do you deal with that by just having an extra studio rather than making absolutely every system redundant?
Thanks. And just picking up there's a couple of photos here showing the atrium, showing the scale of this building. It is an absolutely vast building. It's a lot smaller than the old one. It's a lot more compact, but you can navigate around the building in a way that wasn't possible in the old site. So staying with you, Sharif, where on earth do you start when you're trying to do this? And the starting point is design. So would you like to just pick up a little bit about, how did you come in as an operational design input when you were thrown into the project?
Well, a good project manager is key, and we had an excellent project manager in Andy Lawton who looked after us and completely held our hands in terms of design, telling us how and explained to us how we should think about and going about making decisions. I mean, starting off, the whole scale was huge, and again, the guidance from project manager, a good project manager, is really kind of key to that. And I think the things that always get you are how far ahead you have to make some of these decisions. And while I wasn't directly involved with what the builders, I would get things from Andy as the project manager, who would then say, we need to know this sort of thing even before the builders need to know this sort of thing now, even though we're thinking, well, it's 5 years down the line or whatever it was. And the whole building, everything has been a catalyst for the way changing the way we work. Project team having to deal with us and deal with people that are kind of on them to keep pressures on budgets on us who want as much as possible out of those budgets. So there's lots of conflicting kind of requests, I suppose, bigger, better, all the rest of it, but at the same time keeping costs and time, which time was always the biggest one, especially with some of the challenges we had, especially towards the end with COVID. And yeah, I think I can imagine it was a tough job for a project manager to stay in between all of that, because they want to work for us and get us what they want, because they want to leave a successful project behind, but they know that the challenges they've got their end.
Yes, indeed. There's a cultural clash between local teams and project teams. So you've got the different ways of thinking. A project team comes in and delivers something. It perhaps doesn't have the emotional attachment to the project to start with, but very much does by the end. I mean, I've been working on this project for 7 years, and I'm finishing now, and I'm feeling quite a significant tug, as I know I won't be coming down to Cardiff anymore. You've got local teams who are perhaps more geared up for firefighting and dealing with getting productions on air day in, day out, but each one different. And then you've got the project who are looking at the longer term thinking, and the timelines are different. We're also dealing with much larger pots of money. So the project is fortunate to get a one-off shot at spending significant money to get the technology in and working, whereas the local teams probably don't have day-to-day capital spend available to them. They're dealing with operational spend, much smaller budgets, and it shapes the thinking. So what seems prohibitive to the local context may actually be the best way of doing things, and you only get one shot at something this big, so you have to do it right. And so we've got to shape. It's going too far to say sort of not doing bodges, but sometimes it comes close to that. The local team will want a quick fix to get something done right, but we might want to take a step back, slow down, and do things. And you can see some of the scale involved. That picture over there on the right, that's just one small part of the wiring going in. That's probably 1,000th of what went in. Everything on this project is in a big scale when you're doing it. Design is the trade-off between simple and complex. And by the way, all these photos we're showing here are from the new building. Over on the right there is the core of our IP 2110 live core, and below it the traditional radio transmission router. We do still have quite a lot of AES3 and even a bit of MADI for the final transmission. There's a conscious design decision not to push the innovation right to the transmission. We want something where we can keep going. So we need systems that were easy to use, but working with very complicated technology. How on earth do you do that? You need to present things to the end users in a way that is easy to use whilst using this high tech. And you need flexible spaces. We can assign the different studio galleries to floors in TV. We can assign the different live rooms to the control rooms in radio. And that's got to be easy to use. So it's very, very difficult to get all this high tech technology working in such a way that actually everything can integrate. And BNCS is our main weapon there. We can integrate so much through our BNCS control system. And you've got to think about resilience as well. Studio simplicity means you've got to think about resilience. Are you actually going to try and make all the systems in a studio robust and resilient in themselves with duality and perhaps multiple systems, or are you going to build it so that when one studio goes wrong, you move to the next? You can only fit so many in, so you've got to trade off between all these different considerations. Just showing a few more photos there. We've got one of the radio studios with the DHD desk, one of the CalRec desks in the TV gallery, and the SSL System T in our drama studio, and of course the obligatory picture of the satellite dishes up on the roof.
Mic.
We do still have some downlinking. So then suddenly we're going through all this the design, and we move into delivery. All of a sudden the pace changes. How on earth do you move from doing things on paper, doing planning where it seems like an endless jigsaw puzzle that you're shuffling the pieces around, and all of a sudden you're building it? And we've appointed by that stage a systems integrator, and we work with DB Broadcast, a very good choice. We had a comprehensive procurement process to choose our systems integrator, as you'd expect. But they don't know necessarily everything that you want to achieve. They don't necessarily know how to integrate everything. They can join it all up. They can do all the drawings. They can do all the configuration. They can't do the workflows. They can't do the training. And they can't necessarily do all the configuration. So you've got to work with them and drag in more and more expertise from the users as you go down that phase. Configuration is absolutely pivotal, but it's tedious to get right. And testing, I can't emphasize this enough. Testing, particularly with the move to IP. And Sharif, if you want to just go through some of the things that happened that were unexpected while we were on site.
Well, one of the new things that was new to me was the whole idea of a black start test, which I know lots of people were nervous of. The idea of basically switching the building off and on again, which I think from Mark's perspective, I gather went kind of generally well, but turned up a few useful things. We've still got some teething issues. So there's some of the simple problems, and it's usually the things that you don't expect. On day one, we had. There were lots of things we were watching very closely, and they all worked fine. And some of the other things that had been working fine throughout testing started throwing up some problems on day one. So that the very epitome of expect the unexpected. And even you've got other issues throughout the build. Things like you might have animals involved, like a seagull dropping rocks onto the roof of the building, or particularly on the glazed roof of the buildings, breaking a pane of glass, just cracking it, I must say, no glass shattering to the floor, and you just have to adapt and keep going. Really, it's just like with program making, which I've always felt are just mini projects in themselves. I'm sitting in one of them now. Such a broad range of output that we have to work towards. It's not just one network, and not even one. And even within the networks, they're not. The Radio Wales and Radio Cymru are not focused on one type of programming. It's not news, and it's music, it's entertainment. It's we've got the drama studios. So that kind of takes you into that level of uncomfortableness in terms of you collect than you'd ideally like. So we've got a nice mixture of studios, flexibility response to deal with everything that's coming at them, and they've dealt incredibly well with the COVID stuff that we've had to deal with in terms of remote production and presentation. Utilization was important because, again, to get the maximum value, you had to reduce the overall numbers. Some departments had their own little workshops, which I'm sure lots of people are familiar with, just a small desk and a microphone. So we've actually gone down on paper. It looks like we've got fewer facilities, but all of those facilities are on air capable and fully featured studios, but they're all shared, and with booking systems and all the rest of it, we get maximum utilization out of them. And something that we're just working on at the moment is finishing off the virtualization, which was implemented into the design of the studios, and the adaptability, the most important thing about them. And in terms of COVID, that had a big impact. Obviously, it knocked the actual project on in terms of what we were when we were planning to move in this year, but I think the project did incredibly well. I don't know how it was from your perspective, Mark.
It surprised us. I mean, we were lucky. We'd put in an awful lot of remote configuration connectivity into the back-end control systems, and we're modest changes to the information security approach to that. We were able to use that for remote working. We actually found some teams sped up working from home. So our control system teams, we suddenly stopped having to have them join meetings, and they were able to just cut code, and they really thrived. And I've got to say that the output from our production of code really shot up unexpectedly during COVID. Other things slowed down. So training, you can't quite make it out in those photos, but we had to adapt all sorts of peculiar mounts for cameras. So we'd have the way to do Zoom training in a gallery is to put loads of webcams in, looking at all the bits of equipment, and then let people see that remotely, and have one or two people in there working safely to press the buttons. So it worked, and we decided we needed to go live over the summer regardless. So we foresaw there'd be a second wave, which indeed there has been. We foresaw there'd be more lockdowns, and we had to go really hard. And some of the training probably hasn't been quite as in-depth as we'd like. Some of it's been a little bit more woolly around the edges because of Zoom and not being on site. But we completed the testing, we completed the training, and we've got in, and we're on air. And by and large, it's gone pretty successfully, but it's been a hell of a hard journey to get that and you know, right down to sort of details like people coming in across from England to Wales, crossing the bridge, having to have permits to do that. Even people coming in abroad from some of our vendors last minute who needed to have permission to fly in and be COVID safe. It's been difficult, but we've got there. So outcomes, looking at the project, the pressure points aren't always where you anticipate. You know, we mentioned already just crazy things like birds dropping stones on the roof. You know, no one could have foreseen that. You sometimes get problems in the design on the bit where you just thought it was going to work, and conversely, the really complicated stuff, sometimes you plug it in and it works first time. You know, black and burst reference, SILA reference, curse faults, the high speed 100 gig fibers, you plug them in, they work first time. It's not how you think it's going to be. We're really working down here. I think I speak for everyone in the project team who've been sort of shipped in from London and Manchester in the main to come and work down here. We've been down here one way or another for a long time now. We've felt really welcomed by the local team, and we've really made good friends down here. And a lot of us will continue to keep our roots connected down in Cardiff after the project is finished. I think we've found the right balance, and it's very difficult to describe how you go about doing this. It's down to good project management, but also building good friendships between tight process-driven project delivery and just free-form chaos of getting on and doing it. And you need a bit of both in a big project like this, but you can't leave it all to the last minute. If you do that, nothing works. So we've had to drive some process and find that balance. And like any big project, especially a BBC project where there's all the corporate bureaucracy, the internal and large managed to cut through it. And proof is in the pudding. I'd invite everyone to come down and have a look here. Obviously can't at the moment, but once COVID eases, I'm sure the building will be more opened up to visitors as it's intended to be. Sharif, you've got a few viewpoints as a user as well.
The important one being that it works, which is always good. Everyone's very happy with what we've got, especially compared to the facilities we had in Llandaff Broadcasting House. One of the things that really helped in the project is we did some mock-ups. We were up to our knees in cardboard and MDF, and it worked. That really helped surprisingly well, especially for the design of furniture. So there's so many details that we can point to that was as a direct result of doing mock-ups, and we went as far as a small project kind of proof of concepts are incredibly helpful. Like, I know to hearing guys about putting systems together, that sort of thing. Yeah, I'm really happy with everything. It has been a strange way to move in, but that's where we are. Social distancing is more. We're more able to deal with that here, but it's still been a challenge. But the studios have adapted incredibly well. And like I say, config tweaks are ongoing. Just the nature of this sort of building, it'll be a while before everything, I think, completely settles down. But I think considering the challenges we've had towards the end, they've done incredibly well.
We thought we'd conclude with a few top tips. So we both came up with independent set of top 5 top tips. So going from a project point of view, for me as a technical delivery lead in the project, to coin a phrase, stop, collaborate and listen. You've got to collaborate and listen to the users in order to know what you're going to deliver. You can't give everybody everything, and sometimes there's some left field views that you can't take on board, but you've got to listen and try and get what they want. You've got to set realistic goals and timelines, and be able to adapt them if you need to. Know your limits and don't push too hard. That comes both in terms of what you're trying to achieve from a technology team of a certain size and also from the technology. So, you know, we were pushing very hard with the move to IP and technology. We've got to test and test and test again and use formalized tools to do that testing. So we were using TestRail and Jira to manage all the testing. It's to what we're used to of just plugging in the mic, tapping it a few times and doing the lineup and moving on. There's a lot of things to get right. And you've got to plan carefully, but be willing to...
From our perspective, the users, it was about being really honest with requirements. You know, do you really need those extra microphones? You know, some small studio, you're trying to squeeze in too many people. Are you asking for too much equipment just because you think you can? That sort of thing. Which ties into then challenging those existing workflows and practices. The whole, just because it's always been done that way doesn't mean that's the way we should continue to do it. Project manager will love you if you're prompt with any decisions that you have to make. In fact, I just had to deal with something like that today with one of the config things we're doing. The quicker you can get back to them with decisions and be decisive, that will really help them. And my personal one, don't let perfect be the enemy of good. I'm constantly guilty of it and having to keep an eye on it. Otherwise, the project would go on for years longer than it already has. And engaging a broad group for high-level design stuff at a very simple stage, but you really need to keep a select few for detail, otherwise it becomes madness by committee.